Welcome back, guys. My name's Alex. That's Eileen, and you guys are watching Straight to the Chicane podcast. And this is a podcast where we talk about Formula One, all the ins, the outs, the memes, the things that are happening, the gossip, everything that you can go around with Formula One. And that's what we're trying to accomplish here on this podcast. So thank you guys for watching. First of all, appreciate that very much. Last time we saw you guys, we were talking about Bahrain. And between Bahrain and today, there has been another race, Jeddah.
Yes.
We missed Jeddah. We didn't get a chance to get our podcast out due to unforeseen events and work-related problems. So,
Yes.
yeah.
And my birthday.
Yeah, and your birthday. So we had a lot of stuff going on, and yeah, we're now just getting back into it as the season's kind of unloading. And honestly, this week was wild. We didn't have Max Verstappen win. It's spoiler alert, I know.
Spoiler alert.
But we're really excited about that. I think most people were ready to see somebody else win. And honestly, it couldn't be happier for Carlos.
Yes.
The fact that, honestly, if you guys remember, if you guys have been paying attention to Formula One season, 2 weeks ago in Jeddah, they were practicing, and Carlos was sick and wasn't feeling good, and he left after practice 2, did not participate in practice 3, and didn't practice in qualifying. They brought up one of their junior drivers, Ali Behrman, and I don't know, I've talked about him a bunch in previous podcasts.
You do love him. Yes.
I said he's got a really good opportunity. He looks like a really good driver. He's very strong. And honestly, they brought him up, and he brought points in a Ferrari on his first debut.
He almost knocked out Lewis from Q3.
Honestly, though,
I like the hair on his 18-year-old chin.
Yeah, and I bring him up just because I know that I brought him up previously in previous podcasts, previous seasons, and honestly, it's still worth to mention that this young driver is very talented. Mm-hmm. He was also in a top-seated truck car. And
That he was, but still impressive.
Very impressive.
He did put it on pole in F2, and then what a crazy 24 hours to get called up.
He had you should look him up. He's a young up-and-coming driver, 18 years old. He's racing in Formula 2, which is one of the subcategories in the Formula Series. And I think he'll be one of the stars you'll be seeing in the near future for sure, and I'll keep saying it.
Yeah.
He's a really good, talented driver. And so that kind of leads us now into what happened was Carlos got appendicitis.
It seems like appendicitis is like a hot topic every year. Like obviously last year we had the whole Alex Albon having his appendix taken out, which we all know, transpired into a slew of things that happened. And people are still tying, events that happen in Formula One back to, Alex having his appendix out. But interestingly enough, Carlos got his appendix out and was there on race day. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, he looked a little rough, obviously, after just having surgery. But he was there for the race, which was, he was sore. And I think leading into Australia, it was expected he was going to race. But is he going to be in, true form?
Yeah, I mean, so it's been, 10?
It's been 2 weeks.
2 weeks. So 14 days, roughly.
Yeah. From
a post-op surgery where he had, 3 incisions or whatever it was.
I think it's just one.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yes.
Nonetheless, to say the least, the fact that the best rest for him was resting for 7 days. I heard him talking about it. Mm-hmm. That he sat, in a bed just resting, and he's like, man, I need to train, but that's not necessarily the best thing for the body after something like that, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, I'm sure his body recovered well because he is a true athlete who is in great shape and, all those factors that go into it. But crazy. I mean, interestingly enough, he had a rocky last couple years at Ferrari, and it's like they announced prior to the season that he essentially doesn't have a seat for next year, and he's pretty much just been balls to the wall.
Yeah.
Race 1, killed it. Mm-hmm. Race 2 was out, but powered through. Race 3 comes back, great qualifying, and overtakes Max because Max made a mistake, whether it was his car or not. Obviously, then his brakes blew up. But it still probably would have been a good little battle there at the front, I think that Carlos is one to not back down right now. And what does he have to lose?
He has nothing to lose. It's just a matter of where he's going to go. The rumors say Audi.
I think after this weekend, there's a lot of people that are obviously already circulating the conversation about where is he going to go. everyone is obviously going to want to be after him. And so I'm sure there's going to be a lot more conversations taking place. I mean, you heard the drivers in the post press, and they were all like, I'm sure there's a ton of team principals having that conversation.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, Carlos is the only driver who's beaten a Red Bull, and mainly Max Verstappen.
In the last 2 seasons.
In the last 2 seasons. And the only driver in the last 2 years to win at Ferrari. And he doesn't have a seat next year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I mean, it's kind of like how Sergio Perez was a few seasons ago when he didn't have a seat.
I feel like it just brings out like the cutthroat, like, you know, it's that motivation for the drivers. I know when people tell me that, like, I can't do something, or like, you know, you're not good enough to do something, it like motivates you more to be like, I'm going to prove myself. And so I just feel like Carlos is a different person this year.
Yeah, so needless to say, Carlos, he put down a really good race this weekend in Australia, and I think he was top form. I think he didn't really make any mistakes, really. I didn't see any. He was able to pull away from everybody. He was able to even make a pass on Max Verstappen. Granted, Max's car.
Yeah, something was wrong with Max's car.
Like he said, it felt like the handbrake was on the whole time. So I guess I would imagine in the braking zones that was probably a big issue right away.
Well, and there was brake issues for both Red Bulls going into, you know, race day. I don't know if it was like the beginning of qualifying or FP3. They both were talking about their brakes not performing the best. The brakes aren't biting.
I mean, you kind of heard that across the board too. You know, the Mercedes, like you said, Mercedes. It was like
I don't want to talk about Mercedes.
The brake feels long. The brake pedal feels long.
Yeah.
Was in practice a few times. I heard by both drivers.
Right.
I mean, there was kind of a lot that happened in Australia this weekend.
You know, interestingly enough, it's like conflicting messages from, like, I think the community. It's like some people were really happy with the race. Other people were like, it was boring. And granted, we took Max out of the equation. There still wasn't a lot of overtakes.
No.
You know, there wasn't a lot of like crazy action. But I think we were all just excited at this prospect that it wasn't Max.
I mean, you saw,
which is crazy.
Yeah, it just somebody other than Max, and that it just gave us the opportunity to possibly have the two McLarens kind of make some moves, or even, you know, if Mercedes and George was kind of trying to make some moves, and we saw, you know, with Sergio Perez having the penalty, he was kind of making a come up in the second round, you know, the second half.
I mean, you would have expected that Sergio would have been able to get through a lot faster.
A lot faster and make a run for, yes.
So people are obviously, so there was a lot of graining with Red Bull this weekend. I know that. And so they were struggling more so on their tires than some other teams.
Well, going into the weekend, everybody kind of knew, a lot of the teams were even talking about that this might be Red Bull's worst track. Just the type of high speed, tire graining, you know, high speed turns, you know, so like, other cars are more optimal for, you know, i.e. Ferrari. This is more of a Ferrari track, high speed. And we saw that they were looking good during practice. They were, I think, having some of the better times for their race pace was up there. And then what else did I notice is that, you know, I think the big thing to talk about, though, is Alex Albon during practice won.
Yes.
Red flags.
Very conflicting feelings.
The race damages his car bad enough that the whole cockpit, the safety chassis structure is damaged. And unfortunately, Williams doesn't have a backup chassis for either driver. Now,
they didn't have it with them, I think.
No.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, so obviously we all know what happened, but Alex Albon's, I can't speak, his car was damaged beyond repair, essentially. And I woke up to the news and was like, so they gave Logan's car to Alex. Yeah. Because Alex is obviously, you know, the stronger performer, and where they're getting that data from is obviously, I would assume, from last year and the first 2 races, because neither driver has points this season.
But Alex Albon has finished and qualified higher than Logan so far in the last 2 races.
Sure.
And most of the last season. Actually, I have to say every race last season.
Right. He was the only driver to out-qualify his teammate in every single race. He was a rookie, so I think it's kind of challenging and a little bit, I feel for Logan Sargent, I think a lot of people do.
For sure.
That you did nothing wrong and you're being penalized and basically told that you have to sit this one out and you have to be on the bench and stay here and be a good teammate and be supportive. And, the cameras, were cutting to him the majority of the weekend. So FP3 and obviously qualifying. I didn't see him on the broadcast yesterday during the race. I know he was there. But, you've got the media in your face. You've got everyone's asking questions about it.
Yeah.
That sucks. He said it was the hardest thing that he's had, decision he's ever had to, deal with in his career.
I mean, where it'll affect him is, at the end of the season. Because his contract is up at the end of the season anyway, so it's how bad will this could affect him getting a renewed contract?
Right.
At the end of right now, it shouldn't affect it, but at the end of the season, it's well, you didn't score any points.
Yeah, but how mad are you? You're sitting on the bench. Your coach told you, you know what, your boss, whatever you want to call him, told you, listen, you're not good enough to race. Is essentially what they're telling him. Essentially the message that you're getting. He's better than you.
Yep. He's our number 1.
He's better than you, and you have to give this up, and then he doesn't even get any points.
Yeah, it sucks.
He doesn't get any points, and there's the world champion is out. Another world champion on the grid is out. Let's see. Let's just take Sauber out of the equation because they can't do anything right.
Their pit stops suck.
They can't put a wheel on their car, take it off.
Yep.
So you would expect that Williams would perform better. And so, part of you as Logan Sargent is
he's still got a lot to prove. He's still a young driver.
He does. What if he would have performed great this weekend? And James Valls did say that his qualifying, that they're super close together on pace.
They are.
So, I think no matter how it shakes out, I get it. They ran the risk. They're okay, we have a more tenured driver, somebody who's more experienced and has proven to get better results in the past. Let's go with him this weekend. Or if they would have went with Logan, what does that look like? Someone's going to be disappointed.
Yeah, and it was Alex's birthday. We can't forget that.
It was Alex's birthday, so that was his present.
Yeah.
Lucky him. Luckily, he didn't crash the car, because can you imagine if he would have binned it, in qualifying, and then it's just Williams is packing up and they're moving on to the next race.
They're going to Japan early.
Yeah, that was that race when, was it 2 seasons ago when Ferrari, both the cars were out and they just packed up, the pit wall was gone before the race was even over?
Well, we're leaving.
Yeah, so, I think that there was a lot of talk about it, but, regardless, I think you're going to get scrutiny no matter what the decision is.
Yeah, I think they made a business decision. Whether you're liking it or not, it was all based upon stats and probably what an AI question was asked, and that's what AI gave them to, and they all agreed that was probably the right answer.
You love to talk about AI.
Just my.
Everything has to tie back to AI.
Because they use it for strategy too, you know.
Sure they do. You know that.
I do.
I think it's funny that they asked all the drivers, obviously, what their opinion was, and the only one who had some type of a funny, sarcastic, not sarcastic response was Max. And he pretty much said he'd either be packed up on his jet, gone, or he would crash the car on purpose because nobody's driving it. And I don't think he's lying. I think he would do that. And it's funny, but is it funny?
So in the Australian race this weekend, he did have a early retirement, and he did leave the track fairly early. Granted, it wasn't in anger or anything like that. He stayed for a little bit.
He stayed. I'm pretty sure he stayed for the whole time.
Okay. I thought I saw him leave early, but maybe I was wrong.
I don't know. All I know is going into this weekend, I was one of those F1 fans that's man, the race is on at 12 o'clock. The race is on at 1 a.m. I'm old. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it, this all the way up until the race. And should I just watch it in the morning because I already know Max is going to win? And then it's like the race happens. Now, granted, this year it was a lot nicer because they did move it up an hour for us because of, remember last year, the sun setting and everyone's visors, like they had that issue at the end of the race.
They had the issue that because they don't have lights for the track, and it was kind of getting like to
the
that.
The sun was
dust.
like setting into their eyes, and there was a crazy
issues.
crash.
Yeah.
So it started earlier, but it was like, the race starts, and first of all, the race start felt really rushed. Like it was like they cut from like the back when the safety car pulls up and the green flag is waving. And I swear to God, I hit the lights and there was already 3 lit up. And I'm like, what's going on? This is so fast. And then the lights go out and Max takes off. And at this point, I'm like, he takes the lead and here we go. How much is he going to win by? And that's what it was looking like. Like, do we need to turn the TV off? Is this just another class act, Max weekend?
But honestly, if we're talking about the race and a little bit of it, Carlos was able to kind of stay within that 1 second. Like, didn't get out of DRS zone, Well,
there was only DRS for 1 lap.
Well, which is nice this season is that it is only one lap.
So they did the first lap. This is like the first time, apparently, that everyone's made it through turn 1.
In Australia.
In Australia.
Yeah.
So that's crazy. Mm-hmm. So everyone made it through clean. It was all good. And then it was lap 2. So he had DRS for 1 lap. That was clean, and that was it. Max's car, he had that little, mistake or whatever because something was wrong with the car, and we didn't see it on camera because at the beginning of the race we always have to watch the start 97 times. It has to replay 500 times in a row. So we missed what was happening, but you could see that Carlos was gaining traction and getting closer and closer, and he was 3/10 behind, and I'm like, oh my God, something happened. And then it was Max had a mistake in turn 3, and then they finally cut to them, and it was it looked like there was something happening with Max's car. And then you were like, I think it's smoking.
It was definitely smoking weird. Not on the center,
small amount. Yeah.
It wasn't coming from the engine. So I was like, all right, something's up. Yeah.
And then it was they went around a few more turns. Carlos had overtaken him at this point, and it's just his whole brakes basically just caught on fire.
So it was very interesting that rear brake, from what we understand, is it locked up right from the start. It never unlocked from the start, so it just stayed clamped on the rotor while they were racing. Instead of just a handbrake was always on the car.
Yeah, that's what
right. And so it totally makes sense that definitely in the braking zones he was going to be having issues. And once it got to the point of it got so hot, it literally exploded, and it was some cool sights to see. For the fact that he was in the pit lane, made it to the pit lane, and the whole thing just blew out the tire and everything. It got so hot that the tire blew out. And
crazy.
Have you saw the photos of the rim?
Yeah.
In the back of the garage, just sitting there smoldering.
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
and they all had to run out with the fire extinguishers.
Yeah.
The craziest part was Max's car started to, obviously he was having an issue, so he started dropping back. Everyone was passing him. At the same time, Alpine's social media admin tweeted double overtake on Verstappen. It's the tweet of the weekend.
Yeah.
Please.
I think
the day that 2 Alpines overtake Max Verstappen, I will be in my grave.
Well, they got a lot of work to do. They're definitely the worst team on the grid right now.
I think it's a good toss-up with them and also with Sauber, but Sauber's shooting themselves in the foot.
Sauber's having some issues too. They're having issues with their tire lug nut that ties the tire to the car.
Valtteri just has the worst luck with pit crews. And I think it's been every single race. So it was Valtteri in Bahrain.
Yep.
Then it was Joe in Saudi.
Yep.
And then it was
both of them.
Both of them this time.
Yep.
Okay, we need some work. We need some practice.
We
need to be running some drills.
They need to change the actual product out, and I think they're going to get in a lot more trouble this weekend because they got a penalty at the end of the race, or at least they got noted for it. I don't know the actual outcome, to be honest. That one of their nuts flew across the fast lane, and that's what they're going to get in trouble for because they weren't able to keep control of the nut because it took off. And totally, it should not be coming off the car. It needs to stay on. So.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So back to Max. I think so. Three laps in, he retired. I think by the time they said he was retired, it was lap 5 technically. But
because he made it into the pit, he made it into the pit, and so the race kept going.
Yeah, and then obviously they were like dealing with putting the fire out. So he hasn't retired in 2 years. So it's crazy to even like that stat alone. Obviously, he was going to essentially tie his own record of 10 race wins in a row with this weekend. And so obviously he's got to start back at 1, which he can still get 10 in a row this season. Yeah. So there's 21 more races, obviously. So, but still, so Carlos again put a shabash on, Red Bull and their wins and their domination. So, bummer to see for Max. I think, he's like, it's part of the game, essentially. People, I think, expected him to be super like frustrated and pissed off in post race, but it's like, I think he realizes how dominant the car is, and he also knows what his capability is. So he's like, whatever. I'm going to just relax.
I agree with that. I think he knows exactly how good the car is. He knows that the mistake of this car sucks, and he was like, this is unacceptable. I saw his lips saying something to one of those engineers. But
not his fault, though. I mean,
it was not.
Yeah.
By no means was it his fault. And, all he can do is shrug it off because he's in the most dominant car right now, and he's in the prime of his life right now. And he still has a lead, even though he didn't race this weekend, really. Mm-hmm. The lead is now, within a few points?
Yeah.
But
it is. And I'll tell you what, I mean, at the end of the day, I think what this weekend does show is, was it a one-off circumstance for Red Bull? But for me, looking at Sergio's performance, Sergio doesn't always perform as solid as Max, but the last 2 races they've had a Red Bull 1-2. So I think we all kind of expected, even for us, we knew that Sergio is starting 6th because of his impeding penalty from qualifying, but we still expected it to be a Red Bull 1-2. Just based on the fact that they've been so dominant and they've been able to just kind of glide through, and we didn't see that this time. We saw him be held up enough by Alonso, be held up enough by Russell, and then he cooked his tires and then was just he was stuck there behind the McLarens and didn't make any progress.
There was moments of rocket shipness.
There was.
From the car.
There was.
And with Perez, but then he like you said, he overcooked the tires.
I think it was all about, there was some unusual, the race I would say was mostly strategy, mostly pit stops. That's what we saw.
Yeah,
so there was, Lewis was on a different, he started on softs, and so he pit super early. But
then so did his teammate on a set of mediums.
And then a lot of people pit. Yeah, a lot of people pit early on the mediums.
I think there was some issues. Well, I think they noticed that if they didn't pit now, that the guys on the new tires like Lewis and them were going to be able to undercut them pretty quickly. So I think they had to do something pretty drastically, and that's why all the guys on the medium.
But it's just funny. I feel like, we did see Sergio have to have a decent amount of overtakes, and both Mercedes that he got by, they're like, oh my God, that car's so fast. It's so fast. It's every race we have to say it. Everyone knows it's a rocket ship. Everyone knows it's on rails. Everyone knows it's so amazing, so it's no surprise. But I think it's just crazy to hear from them. They always have to say something, or they always have to cut to them saying something. So
I think they're always cutting to them saying something, but yeah, it seems crazy how fast once Sergio got ahead of Lewis, it was just pulled away from him pretty quickly. Mm-hmm.
Same thing with George. Once he finally got past him,
it was just gone. Within the lap that he passed him in, it was a second ahead.
Yeah.
And it's pretty. It's man, that car is pretty quick.
I think George was struggling on his tires because he ended up pitting again too for another fresh set. But I mean, it's fast, but I think it's still unusual. I expected him to be able to be in the top 3. And on the podium.
So let's talk about Mercedes a little bit, because this weekend Mercedes double DNF, both cars. Lewis caused a
safety car because his engine just took a shit, and
the replay was quite honest. He was driving down the back straight, and the car just completely gave out, engine gone, and he was coasting.
I'm just I don't understand. I said it during the race. I'm I don't understand how a team that won 8 consecutive Constructors' Championships can't build a car that is competitive. It's been 3 years. What the hell is going on?
I think key members of their engineering squad have moved on to
like they don't even
Ferrari,
know, but they don't even know. Like it's not even that they can't just build the car. They don't know how to set it up on the weekend. So it's like Lewis said, well, in Saudi they were really bad in the high speed corners. Well, this weekend we're better in high speed, but now we're not good in the low speed. And so it's like, what are they like struggling with?
That I don't know. It's a lot to do with feel, and we heard a lot of the announcers say, and you hear Lewis say that like he likes to have more feel in the back end of the car. So an example is Max likes more a pointy front end, right? So just a small little minute move with the wheel, the car moves instantly. Where that's all in the front end, right? And Lewis likes it more in the back end, where it's more it flows. It's a different type of flow, and I don't think these cars are designed up for flowing anymore. It's all about quick maneuvers that get the airflow under the car. Look, I've never been in the car, so I can't honestly say. I just know that Lewis likes the rear end control, and they don't have enough rear end control, so that's why you see him adding a different wing, a more intense wing compared to what George was, and they were flipping back and forth with wings and having more downforces because they thought that would be it, but it's just not helping them because the more downforce you have in the high speed areas, the slower you are because you're more of a sail, you know? And so it's just like, what do you do?
I don't know. They just, all weekend, it just felt like they couldn't do anything right. So,
100%.
They didn't. They didn't score any points, and they didn't finish the races.
Honestly,
neither driver finished the race.
Neither driver finished the race.
The car didn't work and it was like a setup change. I'm getting all pissed off. Setup change during every free practice. It's like, free practice 2, they changed Lewis's car drastically, and it was so bad that he was literally like in last place. And then also, like free practice 1, their straight line speed was so bad that they lost 7/10 on the straight line. Like, I'm confused. Like the Haas had higher top speed by like 10 kilometers.
It is sad that they are comparing Mercedes to the Haas in high speed traps.
Yeah, and Haas had both drivers score points this weekend.
They did, which was actually very surprising. Team was very happy. Drivers were ecstatic.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. There's something sour at Mercedes. I think
you've been saying it for a while.
I keep saying it. There's something sour there, and they're just not firing on any cylinders together. Like, this feels like, not from a performance standpoint, but a couple years ago when Ferrari could not do anything right. Like, it was like no one was communicating correctly, and I think I was like, they need to go to a team retreat and get everybody together and have a powwow session and get them all on the same page so they can be working forward. That's not the case for Ferrari anymore. Ferrari is and granted they're not as quick, I think, from a race pace perspective, but they will get there, I bet. There's not going to be just one fluke race win this year. I guarantee they're going to continue to build on what they have, and their drivers are pretty solid. Fred's doing a good job. There's some good things moving there, but Mercedes, I just feel like, even during practice, George was like to his engineer, why do I keep finding Lewis on the lap every time? They're not communicating.
Yeah.
From garage to garage, the engineers should be talking. They should be saying, oh, he's here. And they're on the same team. So there's something unusual happening there. But irregardless, they got to figure it out because there's 21 more races. And right now, Lewis is in 10th in the Drivers' Championship.
The worst he's ever started in his
Worst he's
career.
ever started.
Yep.
This is, obviously, he didn't finish in Australia, but he has 8 pole positions there. And I'm sorry, to the haters out there of Lewis Hamilton who just hate on him forever.
He's washed up, I heard.
He's washed. He hasn't done anything. He sucks. He can't qualify. George has out-qualified him, in every single race in the last 5 races or whatever. Okay, he finished almost P2 last year. He's not washed up. He didn't just forget how to drive. I do agree that, I think George is a little bit scrappier in qualifying because he's had to drive, a car that didn't have top performance. So that could be why we're seeing the qualifying skew. But Lewis doesn't have 104 pole positions just because the car worked.
Right, and during these last few qualifyings, position-wise, Lewis made a few mistakes and was probably in the most ideal spot on the track. compared to maybe what he was a few years ago when he, we were able to strategize and maximize like the right time to be on track for qualifying.
Oh my God, I feel
like that has slipped quite a bit.
Yeah.
On especially on Lewis's side of the garage for sure. Mm-hmm. And it's like, man, I don't know what's going on there. You're right, something's wrong.
Something's not working.
And obviously Lewis saw it, and that's why he's moving on to Ferrari, because Ferrari seems like the only team that's going to be able to put up some sort of fight.
Well, it has been
to Red Bull, and
right.
and hopefully it's more. I'm excited right now after watching this race. I'm like more invigorated, to be honest, that maybe there's a glimmer of hope that we might have a standing chance of more issues with Red Bull.
There could, I mean, I think a lot of people are probably thinking that way too. They had some challenges this weekend. I'm telling you, they were having some issues with their tires, but you as a team, you have to stand your toes at all times. You can't get comfortable. Yeah. And so I think there's going to be some challenges. I think there's going to be, we've got a lot more racing.
We got more racing.
A lot more racing.
The pendulum has not swung in any direction.
It hasn't.
No,
and you know
not
what?
by any means.
I think everyone's like, oh my God, the rankings are so close now. Lewis is in 10th, and a lot can change. We're only 3 races in. We've had a lot of complexities. I think it's 3 points in between Max and Charles right now, and then Sergio's next, and then it's like 4 points between Red Bull and Ferrari because, Ferrari got every single possible point this weekend. 1-2, fastest lap,
Charles got his fastest lap, which helped him out.
So I think we're all excited right now because it is a good sign. We were bummed because we're coming off of a really dominant season of last year, and then the first 2 races were a Red Bull 1-2, but we can't forget that there's been a Ferrari there every single weekend.
There has been.
And so it's like...
and not far behind is McLaren.
Yes. I'm like, they're a little bit further.
Yeah.
But I will say, they brought a great upgrade last year, so it's not that we can't see, something happen. So there's some promising things on the horizon.
Yeah, I'm more optimistic after this race, especially the fact that, Sergio wasn't able to surge all the way up and take the lead or whatever. He was in the top 5. He finished 5th.
Yeah.
But he wasn't fighting for a podium.
But he should have been able, if anything, he should have been able to get past the McLarens.
He should have been on a podium, honestly.
He should have been able to get past the McLarens, and he should have been challenging, Norris at the end at least. But, Norris was catching up to Leclerc. Leclerc was catching up to Sainz. So, it was a better end. But, that's also Sergio's contract is up for, this year. And I think this is another prime example weekend where, should he have done more? But I also don't want to discredit him because he had 2 great races already.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of time.
Yeah. So staying with Red Bull a little bit, we
have to stay with Mercedes, so we have to talk about George.
Okay, go ahead. Talk about George. You're right. We haven't talked about his
crash,
his epic ending, and we've gone off for a minute. So George definitely he DNF'd on the last lap. It wasn't the last lap for him.
He's like the last lap Lando, that was his nickname.
So all right, so let me give this a little bit of context. For the last few laps of the race, he was right behind Alonso, slowly gaining. Within the last 2-3 laps, he was within the DRS zone of Alonso and was trying to make a pass. However, Alonso, 2-time world champion.
Alonso being Alonso.
knows how to use and deploy all of his electrical power and is able to keep himself in front, make himself as wide as possible in all the areas to limit the passing capabilities of any other driver. He's done it to everybody. The only people that can really pass him nowadays are people like Max, a little bit of Lewis, you see him, but he's also put Lewis to school in the last little bit as well.
He's like the master class of defense.
He is.
He knows how to lead a train. He'll start the pack. We saw that in Monaco, and we also hear him. He knows what he's doing. He's conscious of what he's doing. Because he's like, okay, I know what this driver behind me is going to try and do.
Okay.
So he's planning for it.
So that being said, Alonso being Alonso, and now George Russell being George Russell, which we've seen in previous years when he's on Williams and before he's made it onto the Mercedes team, he likes to try to make passes when he probably shouldn't.
George wants to be the hero. That's what it is.
Now, here's a disclaimer. Alonso has been penalized 20 seconds. For this accident. So George Russell was coming through the backside of Melbourne there, and it's a kind of a fast-paced little S area, S turns, and you don't really need to brake. You can slightly let up, maybe even not even let up in certain aspects of the time, and we saw clearly George Russell was coming to the back of Alonso, and Alonso seemed to have probably let up.
He braked.
So he braked when he probably didn't need to brake, and it caused George Russell to fully lock his tires, lock it up, and then he kind of pretty much...
He went straight through the gravel trap.
Yeah.
Into the wall.
Into the wall, kicked both side wheels, broke off, and at least they stayed with the tether. It seems like the tether with the tires is working a lot better this year, because I've seen about a lot of other accidents that, the tires have not gone flying. Yeah. In previous seasons and previous years, a lot of more tires have gone flying, So I think that's pretty good. But then the tires kind of got shook underneath the car, and it kind of made the car kick up sideways. And George was a little scared in the car.
So you wouldn't be scared?
I would. Look, he's right. Calling for a red flag. He was right for calling the red flag.
He's in the middle of the track, upside down, facing the other direction. He can't see anything that's coming towards him, and he's strapped in with like 100 seatbelts.
Yeah, I would agree that he didn't know, but
and so he's immediately calling for a red flag because you have to think about it. They're all maybe 5 seconds, 6 seconds, whatever behind.
Yeah.
And what if they don't notice? There was so much dust from the gravel too, and so it's like they did obviously call for the VSC right away.
They immediately went VSC, and which was the right move to do because that just immediately cuts the power to all the cars, which is right. That's great. And it was the last lap.
His engineer was like, okay, I'll keep calling them out to you. He's like, you've got, Sonoda coming, you've got this person. So he was calling them, and that, obviously you saw towards the end, it was the cars that were right away that he was most nervous about. Everybody else was going by super slow. Yeah. But still, if you get in a car accident, you're upside down, you're in the middle of the road, you don't know what's going to happen.
I just think the race director made the right call on this one by not red flagging the last lap because you could just end it under the VSC.
I know, isn't that so crazy that we can end a race under a safety car?
Yeah, like it should have been in 2020.
Isn't it so crazy that you can end a race under a safety car?
Yeah.
But yes, anyways. So what a bummer for Mercedes this weekend. Toto post-race said he feels like he wants to punch himself in the face.
Yeah, I think overall Mercedes had a really tough weekend.
Dude, they were the donkey. They were the donkey of the weekend.
I think they're slowly becoming... the car is better than what it was previously, but it's still not great. I don't know, man. That's what they keep saying.
I'm like, is it though? Because when I think about the starts to the last two seasons, so Lewis was on the podium in Australia last year. George was on the podium in Australia the year before. Lewis was on in Bahrain, obviously, because of Red Bull's engines having those issues. So, some complexities to it, but at the end of the day, I feel like the car... They haven't figured it out yet.
They have not.
So.
Yeah, I think they got a lot to do, and we'll see what comes.
But I'm wishing best of luck to them because, obviously I want Lewis to have a good last season at Mercedes. He's been there for so long. So it's to have him not even be a contention for fighting at the front, is just so disappointing. Mm-hmm. So I really hope they get their shit together. So please. Maybe they need a powwow. You guys take my advice. Maybe you guys need a little retreat. Go to Tokyo. I don't know if they're going straight to, obviously, Suzuka. They've got a week off. Come together and just kumbaya, figure it out.
Kumbaya, my lord.
Kumbaya, yes.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with that. They need to figure it out. Can we move on from Mercedes?
We can. Goodbye, Mercedes. Yes. Until next time.
Yep. See you in Japan. Let's talk a little bit about Red Bull. I tried to bring them up earlier. We still have some gossip issues that are outside of the actual racing. We don't know who's going to take over for Sergio's seat. We don't know if Sergio's going to get a seat yet. What else is there?
We could talk obviously about Hornergate, but I'm over it at this point. Right,
well, let's briefly, because some people don't know that watch us. So A female employee has raised concerns about misconduct. This female employee has been let go.
She was suspended.
Suspended with pay until further investigation.
I don't know if she was suspended with pay. That's not confirmed.
Okay.
But she essentially, here's the thing. The context is she filed the complaint. Red Bull did an independent investigation. They cleared Horner. Horner came back. He's been at every race. Everything's been good. There was a Google Drive link dropped with hundreds of text messages and photos and what appeared to be inappropriate behavior between him and, I think, his personal assistant. They obviously got a little bit too close. He's married, and it's not professional or appropriate. And, so at the end of the day, there's a lot of conversation around it. The problem is that the investigation and the outcome of it has not been transparent. No one knows what really took place or what's happened, or has there been any type of I guess disciplinary action or conversation around it. And so people are pissed off, rightfully so. This is a sport that is worldwide that a lot of people look up to, and specifically women.
I would say a lot of women are new fans in this.
It's sport, not even about that, but people trying to be like women in motorsport,
right? Empowering that, yes.
And that's the example. Laura Winter gave a great monologue saying, it's a difficult week in Saudi to be a woman in motorsport. And and then there's nothing after. It's just conversation just ceased to exist.
Yeah.
And then we go on from there. So I don't even know, is it resolved or is it not resolved? A lot of team principals are not happy with it either. Right. Zach Brown calling for there needs to be more clarity around it. And, I understand there's a different governing body or whatever, but it's just.
So the female employee, she filed a complaint with the FIA. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where it's at right now.
Yeah, and I think, too, on top of everything else.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
On top of everything else, the Susie Wolf shit from this, off season with them filing an investigation into her.
Okay, so briefly, Susie Wolf is Toto Wolff's wife. She's co-owner of Mercedes-AMG, and she is the president.
She's the managing director of the F1 Academy.
F1 Academy, which is an all-female driving class that does a lot of the install races for Formula One while they do all the races around the world.
Right.
Anyway, Susie Wolff, very influential. She was a female. She's driven Formula One cars before. Yeah. She's a very fast driver.
So
probably beat everybody I know.
Pretty much, essentially, and we're getting off. I'm going off on a tirade, but I think that ties into obviously she filed a formal complaint too. But in the off season, there was an investigation from the FIA looking into her based on is she sharing information because she's married to Toto that there shouldn't be in their household.
Well, she was cleared of that.
She was cleared immediately. Okay. But she also wasn't they just filed it and there was no conversation with her prior to. She found out basically on social media or through the actual claim that was filed. Right. So she's filing a complaint back, and so obviously that was leading into this weekend, and all the drivers were asked about it. Lewis being Lewis and being outspoken was I support Susie. And in a climate where if you're a female and you file a complaint, you can lose your job, we need to make sure that we're backing people up. And so it's sad that all of this stuff is coming out. And, I hope there's a little bit of a bigger conversation happening in the background because we have to continue to challenge for situations that aren't right. So
I would agree. And that's kind of why I wanted to bring up the Red Bull thing. So it is a lot to do with women in motorsports, and you're right. There needs to be some answers of what had happened, and no one's really kind of talking about it. So other than that, Red Bull is looking good, still top of the field, still top of class.
There. Yeah,
it's to them, they're treating it still like it's a man's sport.
Who knows
the boys' club.
I think that there is some stuff happening in the camp at Red Bull. In Saudi, we saw that Helmut Marko basically said, I could potentially be getting fired or quitting because there was an investigation of, is he the one that leaked the photos and the text messages and stuff? We know Jos Verstappen is speaking to the media about Christian Horner and the negativity that it's impacting, where when Christian Horner's doing media, the majority of the questions are around his personal life instead of around his drivers. And Jos is like, I didn't hear him talk about Max once in the press conference, which is a problem. Like, Max and Sergio are their drivers. They should be talking about them. It shouldn't be whatever text messages and this and that during like the media day. It should be about their car, about their performance, about this. So it is taking away, and I think that there's some things happening there, which also the rumor was if Helmut leaves, is Max going to leave?
It's in the contract apparently.
And Max all of a sudden got thrown into the hat for, is he going to go to Mercedes?
I mean, I don't know. Would you want to go to Mercedes with the way?
I would not want to go to Mercedes at this point, but I mean, also Max was like, I'm happy where I'm at. The car obviously is performing, but I don't think anyone would have predicted Lewis going to Ferrari, is what he said. So we can't rule anything out at this point.
Can't rule anything out, for sure. You're right about that.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to McLaren. The team I'm wearing today. The biggest thing I can tell you is that they did a driver switch early on in the race. They let Lando pass Piastri at Piastri's home race. How do you feel? How do you guys feel about that? I'm kind of curious. I think they made the right move. It seemed like Lando had better pace. He was able to pull away from Oscar, unfortunately, and able to maintain that spot and end up getting on the podium. And I don't know. What's your thoughts?
I mean, I think Lando looked faster. So it was probably the right piece. It was after the pit stops, and Piastri undercut Lando.
Yeah.
And so then they swapped them. I think it's his home race. I think Lando should have had to work for it. I think they should have said, fair is fair, you guys fight, instead of having team orders, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that McLaren, and I will die on this grave, they favor Lando. Zach loves Lando. Like, all right, let's go. I'm going to go see my boy Lando on the podium.
It's like his child or whatever.
Like yes, it's crazy. So, and I think Piastri is a great, talented driver. I think he is going to do whatever the team tells him to do.
Yeah.
But was it the right thing? I think they should have had to fight for it.
So made Lando work for that pass.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it was Ferrari, they would have made him do it.
You're allowed to fight.
Yeah. Also, they did tell Ferrari we're going to hold positions.
They did.
And I think that was because they wanted to maintain the 1-2 instead of them fighting and wasting time and having the McLarens catch up.
Yeah.
Understandable on that one. But in the majority of the cases, Ferrari, they are told to fight or they don't listen and they still fight.
Yeah. You briefly said home team, home race. Another home guy was Daniel Ricciardo.
I was wondering if we were going to talk about him.
Yeah. It was his home race. Mm-hmm. Daniel has been struggling, has not performed better than his teammate yet this year.
Yeah.
At the end of this race, he finished, I think, 13th?
Yeah, 12th or 13th.
I think, and then his teammate finished in the points.
7th, after the penalty.
After the penalty, 7th. So, what's going on? I like Daniel. I think I was a fan of him. Just his personality on camera, at least, and he was a pretty badass driver when he was racing for Red Bull. Mm-hmm. And I had high hopes for him when he went to McLaren.
He's definitely not having the start that he needs to for the season. And I mean, at the end of the day, we know how cutthroat Red Bull can be.
Very much
and so, I mean, Helmut Marko already said Ricciardo needs to do something quickly. And, I think F1 predictions had him taking the Red Bull seat next year. At this rate, it's not looking like he's having a seat at Red Bull. Doesn't mean he's not going to be at a team or on the grid. But qualifying this weekend, his time got deleted for track limits, so he was out in Q1, so he had a terrible starting position, and he just really couldn't make up much ground. So, hopeful that he has a better race in Suzuka.
Yeah, I feel like he needs some luck on his side.
He does. Yeah.
because he's not performing to what his caliber is.
Yeah.
Honestly, he's a race winner. He's won Monaco once. He almost won it a time before that. He's got, I think, 4 or 5 race wins.
I think he has 8.
8, yeah. So I think, look, he was number 1 over Max for a moment.
Until the crash in Baku.
Yeah, which was a terrible crash. Which is, honestly, it's a pretty good race. It's a pretty epic. It's a couple years ago.
Why do I feel like there's always some crazy situation that happens in Baku?
Baku was previous years like 18, 17,
like when
18.
Lewis and Seb hit each other.
Yeah.
He's like, he brake tested me, and then
Yeah.
Seb comes up and hits him.
Yeah.
And then
17, 18, 19 are good races in Baku.
So I'm like, it's always crazy there. Which it's going to be later in the season this year.
Yeah.
Because of the
And then
calendar.
also starting at next year, Australia will be the first race of the season,
Oh, cool. Good.
which is what it used to be.
Yes. I remember.
Pretty much at COVID, that was the last year. So 2020.
COVID was, they were there and they shut
right.
down the
That's right.
season. So crazy.
I think another team we kind of talk about them is Sabre Steak. Or
Yeah,
whatever.
I think so. They weren't allowed to run Sauber this weekend for some reason. I think
I don't know that.
in Australia. So their Stake F1 team is what they're called. But man, they are just not looking good. It's looking like the minor leagues, like some really tough pit stops.
And I'll say that you're right, Sabre and the fact that they're struggling with pit stops and just really
Just
mismanaged.
operational components.
Yeah, but then you got Williams too, not having all the parts they needed for their cars. That's kind of amateur, and even James Vowles kind of talks about it in interviews. It's there is a different caliber. There's the top tier teams, the top 5, and then it seems like everybody else maybe is kind of filing in. But we're also seeing Haas is being kind of the top of the bottom 5 teams. They're kind of pushing.
I was gonna say, it's like in Drive to Survive when Toto's getting his espresso and his pumpernickel bread and his breakfast made from a waitress in theirs, and then Gunther's making his own coffee. That's the difference.
Yeah.
From top to bottom.
Yeah. So Sabre's got a lot to do. They're struggling. They're rebranding as Audi in the next few years.
26.
In 26, yeah, once the new engines come out. And they're going to be a full-on works team, engine, everything will be all in-house.
Yeah.
But it's struggling to get there.
Oh my God.
You know, and it's
I'm one more pit stop. If they can just get through a weekend with solid pit stops. We're not even asking for sub 3 seconds, just sub 20-second pit stops.
It's just crazy how much it's changed because they were Alfa Romeo.
They were.
And that's where Charles Leclerc started his rookie year, and I think his second year were there too. And he was putting up points. And Guan Yu Zhou, his fucking rookie year, he was actually doing really well. Mm-hmm. So in a matter of 2 years, that team has kind of gone really far backwards.
Yeah, they'll hopefully get it together. I mean, they're struggling with qualifying, they're struggling with pace. They're struggling with pit stops. It's
another team they're struggling bad. Another team I want to talk about that is just shocking is Alpine.
who haven't we talked about?
Alpine. They are definitely the worst team on the grid.
I don't even know who works there anymore.
Yeah, you do. Ryan Reynolds.
Travis Kelce.
Chelsea Kelsey.
Patrick Mahomes. It's people that have nothing to do with F1.
Yeah, and I mean, look, they can all be investors. That's fantastic. How do I get involved? But that team is struggling.
After Saudi, there was the head of aerodynamics and somebody else, the technical person, they resigned.
Yeah.
So more people leaving the team. So, I mean, hopefully there's some good inner workings changes to the structure and the leadership team.
Yeah.
So that they can start maybe moving in the right direction mid-season, being competitive for points. But it's tough.
Yeah, they're having a tough season, and it's a shame because they are an engine manufacturer as well, being Renault. So they got a lot to do.
That they do.
It's crazy to see that they are doing that bad. I'm just amazed. Mm-hmm. You know. So with the race, we had Ferrari 1-2. We had McLaren 3-4. Mm-hmm.
We had Checo.
Checo fifth, yep. And I think, I don't know if it's just surprising to me anymore, but I think that we should expect to see Ferrari staying up front.
I already said that.
I know.
They are gonna. So first of all, first 3 races, driver of the day every weekend has been a Ferrari. Okay.
Yeah, because Oscar Piastri was in the Ferrari. Yes, you're right.
Ollie Behrman.
Oh yeah.
I was like, Oscar Piastri was in a Ferrari.
No, I don't know why I blanked out on that. Sorry.
So obviously, and then Carlos was driver of the day, the first race and the third race. I mean, he won the race. Charles fastest lap. I mean, Charles, I feel so bad. Like, you know, this is his first weekend in like 7 races that he hasn't been on the front row. He's been biting at the shoes of Max Verstappen to try and wait for him to make a mistake so that he can win a race. And he aborted his Q3 lap this weekend, wasn't on the front row. Carlos capitalized. But it's coming. Ferrari is going to be competitive this year.
They are.
I'm feeling it.
I am.
I'm feeling it.
You're absolutely right. So
I'm putting it out there.
So driver of the day for everybody was.
I voted for Carlos.
You did. Yeah. I think you got to give it to Carlos. It's after an
injury. He literally had a bandage over his appendix surgery and bossed up all weekend.
He did.
Faultless.
You're right.
Yes.
Good job for them. Ferrari won too.
And you also it is so great when Ferrari wins and they all sing the Italian national anthem. I love it.
You're like, no other team does it, and you're right.
There is no other team that does it, and it's amazing. Fred needs to get his Italian down because I did not see him singing the whole thing. But it is like you get like chills when they sing the national anthem.
It's a nice sight to see.
Yeah.
We are getting tired of the Dutch national anthem.
I know. Yeah, but I think it's funny because somebody said or posted or whatever, like we're 3 races in and we still haven't heard the Dutch national anthem on Sunday.
Yeah, that's because the first
2 races were Saturday.
Yeah, that's right.
But we'll probably hear it in Japan, so just be ready.
Yeah, am I missing anything else before we move on to talking about Japan?
No.
I think we've got it all. All right. 1 week off.
1 week off.
Then in Japan, Yuki Tsunoda's hometown.
Yes.
Home race.
Yeah.
One of my favorite tracks, even though I said Australia's, I like that track too. In sim racing, it's fun.
Mm-hmm. You like them all.
I do like most of them. They got rid of the Russia. That track sucked. Who cares about that one anyway? So it's kind of nice that they got rid of that. And I don't really like Bahrain very much, to be honest.
Yeah.
But yeah, so they're in Japan. It's a 3 a.m. race for us.
It's a 1 a.m. race for us.
1 a.m. race for us, so we'll be all right with that.
Yeah, China is a
3 a.m. race. All right, so.
And China is a sprint race. It's our first sprint race weekend, but it is 3 a.m. for us in the States. So.
Yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably see Red Bull back near the top again.
I'm excited to see how China goes, though, because they haven't been there in so long since pre-COVID. So
it has been a while.
4 years. Some of them have probably never even raced there.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never even seen a race in China, so I'm excited.
It's a cool track.
Yeah, I'm really excited. And well, obviously, the nice part for them, I would say, is we'll have the sprint race. So they'll be able to get used to it. So they'll have a little bit more I mean, they won't have more practice for qualifying, but they'll have a little bit more data, I think, going into the race. So.
Yeah, you're right.
Woohoo.
I guess that's it for, other than that. We got our tickets for Austin.
Yes.
We are going to be at Turn 1. We're looking forward to that. We'll be RV camping again, as we always do, for sure. And maybe we're still trying to look at Montreal, although we'll see.
Yeah.
But for sure we'll be in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
We locked that one in.
It's our fave.
Yep. I guess that's it for me.
I think that's it for this week. We covered a lot.
Yeah, we talked a lot. If you guys made it this far, you guys are champions. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yes.
We were curious on what you guys thought of the race, thought of the weekend. What are your thoughts on Ollie Behrman? Do you guys think he's worthy of a seat next year?
There's a lot in the future of F1.
There's a lot.
Liam Lawson,
Yep.
Ollie Behrman.
Yep.
There's a lot coming up. So
so
a lot of open seats too.
Yeah, let us know what you guys think of the weekend, and we'll see you guys real soon in 2 weeks or so. All right.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.